So they're a good team.
Tim Brando, Fox Sports, joins us on 365 Sports. We're in Houston again for Baylor at LSU tomorrow afternoon at NRG in the Texas Bowl, the Kinder's Texas Bowl. Timmy B, thank you very much for your time. We have so much to get to. I want to get to Greg Gumbel at the end of the segment because I know you knew him, worked with him, loved him, as so many others did as well. Let's discuss, first of all, your thoughts about the first round of the college football playoffs. The sky is falling. My God, they've done it wrong. And only focusing in on a couple of the games that were blowouts and not all of the games that were blowouts.
Yeah, I'm really telling everybody that I can talk to today, Smoak. And by the way, Merry Christmas. I hope
you too.
had one, and Happy New Year to everybody there in Sycamore. Let's enjoy this, huh? Can't we just sit back and share? It's the joyful time of season. We need to start enjoying the joyful action that is taking place in college football today. And yet again, we can look in the mirror and find the enemy, and the enemy is us, meaning, the media, which is spending all of its time now talking about whether a black man or a white man should win NFL MVP. Or what's going on with LeBron and Bronny, or what's going on with Aaron Rodgers and what a cancer he can become. I mean, my God, can we turn to anybody but the Big Ten Network and the ACC Network or the SEC Network to hear anything about? Oh, by the way, the first ever college football playoff quarterfinals are about to take place on New Year's Day and New Year's Eve. I mean, it's so sad. It's so sad. It's You want something as badly as the people in college athletics wanted expansion to the playoffs. We got it. And all we heard after the first round was it was awful from people that should be caring about it. And then as we prepare for the next round, and I see some great games, I really do. And if a couple of them have to go sideways, it won't be the first time. How many bad Super Bowls did we go through before we actually got great ones on a consistent basis? I mean, college football is the only sport that is universally panned by the people that supposedly care about it the most. I mean, it's just amazing when you think about it. Those of us that have loved college football for as long as we have, I have people telling me, "Oh, Brando, you're too surfy, you're soft, you're this." But no, I'm trying to tell you, this is a good thing. You need to enjoy it. That's all. And if you find that problematic, then that's on you. I'm not gonna tell you that I suddenly believe that everything about the playoff was bad. I do think that the seeding situation was unfortunate, but they're going to fix that. And there are things that can be done between now and next year to do it. But I think the massive change will come in 26 when the new television contract, which, by the way, is unsigned, has not been signed yet. When the new television contract comes into play, maybe we'll see a little bit more in that because the money is needed. The revenue sharing circumstances are not going to go away. And the more interesting aspect for people that are in our business that actually care about the news being made in our business of college football would be, okay, how are you going to solve the issues with the portal and with NIL as we move into revenue sharing, which, by the way, most of that money is coming from television. How are you going to do that? And basically the commissioners, the people that govern the sport, along with the people involved heavily in college football, need to start concentrating on that. I mean, the coaches are just as responsible. Jim Mora puts out what he puts out today, saying there's tampering going on, and I'm going to start naming it. Jim, just, enjoy your ninth win at UConn. You might get a better deal. You guys might find yourself in the Big 12 one day. That could happen now. Like, enjoy what you just did. Coaches need to know that what's going on in their vacuum, in their insular world, is not what's the most important right now. It's a much grander landscape, and what can affect them and help them with these issues that they're currently facing are going to be decisions made at a much higher level than the guy that's carrying a whistle around his neck. Okay, so everybody here, ADs, presidents of universities, and conference commissioners all need to be a hell of a lot more responsible and control their narrative a little bit better than they currently are.
Tim, Arizona State and Boise State both coming off of the byes and both considered underdogs despite having those higher seeds technically. How much of a chance do you give Cam Scatterbo and company against Texas or Ashton Jeanty and the Broncos against the Nittany Lions?
Well, I believe Ashton Jeanty and Boise State's going to win. I said that when this thing started, and I'm standing by it. I believe they have the requisite tools to get it done against the Penn State team that, in my opinion, in big games can be sometimes underwhelming. Now, they played a tremendous game against SMU, but they played it in front of a partisan crowd, with a freshman quarterback who had an awful day, and that team needed him to be great. And I think the pressure of having to be great got to him, and it turned that game around. Now, is Penn State physically, man for man, on paper, a better team than Boise State? Yes. However, environment means a lot in this sport, as you know. And all you need to do is ask our friends at Oklahoma what that setting was like at the Fiesta Bowl in 2007, because it's going to be a pro-Boise State crowd, rest assured, when they meet tomorrow night. If Penn State wants to win this game, they're going to have to be more dynamic offensively than they were against SMU, and their defense is going to have some strong decisions to make on how many to put in the box and commit to the box to stop Jeanty, because Capers and a few other receivers on that Boise State team can burn you. They got a tight end that can burn you. And Dirk Cutter, as an offensive coordinator with an NFL mind, can burn you. And Maddox Madsen is a quarterback that if you give him single coverage all night long, is going to hit you. He's going to make a difference. And only a few times this year did they need that, but when they needed it, he delivered it. And I still believe if you look back at the Oregon game at the beginning of the year, you could say, well, yeah, Tim, but he was doing it against Fresno State. He was doing it against Wyoming. He was doing it. Go check the numbers in that game with Oregon. I rest my case right then and there. Check those numbers against Oregon. Boise State's got they've got players that could be on any one of these teams besides Boise State. This is not suddenly some G5 team that has lesser players than every other team in the playoff. That's a load of crap. Anybody that espouses that narrative is full of it. They haven't seen what I've seen. So it's strength on strength when you think about it. The greatest strength for Penn State is stopping the run. And Tom Allen's an awfully good defensive coordinator. But I think Cutter is going to do some interesting things formation-wise. And he may let Madsen wing it some on first down from time to time. That'll be the interesting part of this for me, will be how much will Jeanty command the ball or need to command the ball for them to be effective in moving the football. I think that Penn State is going to do what every other team has tried to do, and that is force Madsen to beat them. And you know what? Maddox is named after Greg Maddox, by the way. That first name is because of Greg Maddox, who was, as you know, a bulldog. Well, that's what this kid is. Mm-hmm. He is a dog. Madsen is a dog. All you need to do is ask Spencer Danielson that. He'll tell you. And I think between those two and Capers, that great wide receiver they have, and there are more than that. I mentioned the tight ends are really good too. They got enough to win the game. Now, for Arizona State, I think that extra week probably helped Scatterbo because of all the carries he had to get them where they currently are, to get in this position. You know, they ran roughshod through a 3-3-5 Iowa State defense. It won't be as easy for them this time against a team as good as Texas. But he'll have his moments because he's that good. Levin is another kid that I think can also make plays. Similar story, really, because they're going to force him to make plays because of the presence of James Scatterbo. I think they can hang with Texas for a while, but I think ultimately Texas has just too much weaponry, and I respect the play calling ability of Sark too much for them to pull off the upset. But that's what I see in those first two. And in the other two, Notre Dame and Georgia to me is a pick'em game, fellas. Absolute pick'em game. And then, how well Georgia's quarterback does play is going to affect the outcome because I know Riley Leonard's going to play great. I know he's going to play great. And then on the other one, without a doubt, the flashiest one with the sun setting on the St. Gabriel's, as old Keith Jackson used to say. Oregon, in my mind, just has too many playmakers. And ultimately, I think Glenn Gabriel will make more plays than Will Howard will under pressure. So I like Oregon in that game.
You mentioned Arizona State, Texas. Texas's defense is fantastic. Their offense, as you mentioned, with what Sark does, but their defense has just smothered people. Even when they lost to Georgia the first time at home, Georgia didn't really, except when they needed to at the end of the game. They had the long drive, converted a 3rd and 13 deep in their own territory.
Yep.
But they look like they have 14 players on their defense at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. The saving grace, if there is one for Arizona State, is that Texas has sometimes, more than just a few times, sometimes, they have been their own worst enemy in the red zone and not converted. That Georgia game, the SEC championship, is a classic example. I mean, they outgained. They should have been up by at least 10, maybe 2 touchdowns at halftime of that SEC championship game, and they weren't. Arizona State's going to have to hope that they get a little bit of help from Texas bogging down in the red zone. If that were to happen, then maybe they've got a puncher's chance ultimately.
After the game, and I don't know if it was the first game, Indiana, Notre Dame, and even maybe during what happened on Saturday, you saw and heard what Kirk Herbstreit said when he said, "I don't want to hear about wins."
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell's he talking about? I mean, that's what isn't that the name? I understand in a way what he was trying to say. He's kind of got himself cornered the last couple of years. But what does he mean, Tim, that I don't want to hear about wins?
Well, about a week or so before that, Jim Phillips was on being interviewed by Reese Davis, and they were championing, obviously, SMU, provided they were close or competitive against Clemson, and could they still get in? The whole, either or would the conference championship game be a detriment as opposed to a positive for a team like SMU? And Jim Phillips was making his case about, the teams that were 9-3 that they played, like Duke and Louisville, and how they won, even though they weren't a top 25 team. And then when it was over with, as soon as they got done with the interview, Nick Saban, who sits right next to Herbie, right, says, that was really wonderful what Commissioner Phillips had to say there about those, tremendous performances in a losing effort. But what about top 25 wins? Where are they? I don't see them. Okay, we're splitting hairs. Louisville and Duke weren't top 25, but let's be real here, Coach Saban. What was the difference this year between a team that was ranked 25th and a team that was ranked 33rd? Okay, not much. Not this year. That's why we had so many upsets during the course of the year. That's why the word parity was being bandied about more than just about any other. And the NIL and the portal was responsible for all of this. And I think Herb Street and pretty much everybody on that set is impacted by whatever St. Nick has to say. And listen, I think he's great. I enjoy listening to Coach Saban on that show. I think he's been a tremendous asset for them, no doubt about it. What Kirk needs to understand, even though he is the most recognizable face and voice of college football on ESPN, is that he's not Nick Saban. So when Nick Saban says what he does, like where is your top 25 wins, SMU? Nobody's going to go after him. He's Nick Saban. He won 7 national championships. Kirk, last I checked, good quarterback at Ohio State, never played in the NFL, and by the way, has had a really good career in television. But saying I don't care about the wins, that doesn't wash quite as well as if Nick were to say it. Am I right?
No. Nope.
Does that sound legitimate?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Saban can get away with saying things that others can't. And Kirk, I think, was influenced by what Nick had to say, so that's something he decided to do. The other thing that happens to those guys, and I'll defend him a little bit on this, Smoak, is that they put these guys on these shows all the time, ad nauseum. How many more of these Embrace Debate shows you have to be on? And so they're forced to say things that are the same, but they don't want to say it exactly the same. So they try to find new ways to say something. And when they try to get creative that way, they just paint themselves into a corner. I would be, if he were smart, he would say, you know what, guys, I have to concentrate on a Thursday night game and the NFL. I got to concentrate on game day. I got to concentrate on Saturday. I'll give him some free career advice, okay? Troy Aikman and Joe Buck are doing Monday Night Football, making $18 million a year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in there.
Yep.
Between $10 to $18 million a year. Do you see them on all these shows every morning? No, you don't. So I would say what he's doing is of great value already. So unless they're going to pay him another $5 to $10 million to do First Take and Get Up and all this other stuff, because all it does is put him in a position where he's going to be criticized early and often. And that's sort of what, in my opinion, has happened.
Tim Brando, Fox Sports with his 365 Sports. Greg? Tim, I want to get into Greg Gumbel, and we appreciate your time today. I remember when I was working one of my first Super Bowls back, it would have been in the 90s. And of course, he was a staple of so much studio shows, the NCAA men's basketball tournament where he was fantastic until he missed it last year or earlier this year. Just go and let everybody know you and your knowledge and what you saw and Greg Gumbel in his career and how it had such an impact on so many people, including you.
Gumby was 10 years older than me, and our careers cross-sected as a result. And I go as far back, and if you allow me for just a moment to be a little self-promoting, because I want to remember Greg. That's the first and foremost part of this answer. But Saturday I'll be in Nebraska to do UCLA and Nebraska basketball, January 4th of 2025. January 5th of 1985 is when I started my career nationally on ESPN with Vital doing a game. And later that year, in March, I got a great assignment. You could say it was just a tremendous period for me because I was given the opportunity to work my first ACC tournament for ESPN in Atlanta at the Omni, the one that Georgia Tech won. And I was getting ready to do the Duke-Georgia Tech game in the semifinals with Dickie V. And as I was preparing to do the game, we have these IFP systems, where we have our microphone and we have our intercom system. And they just begun using what they call the mix-minus system, where we could hear the guys in the studio. In the past, in years prior to that, the guys in the truck would be doing a countdown on the throw. We never really heard what the studio guys were saying. We just responded and went on. Now they were able to have the direct throw from the studio host to the play-by-play guy. So we're about, 5 minutes out from going on the air, and it's Gumbel's voice in my ear saying, "Tim, this is Greg. Can you hear me?" And I'm like, "Greg, how are you?" He said, "Hey, man, I just found out you're from Louisiana. You're a Louisiana guy like me. I was born in New Orleans." And, man, it was just such a friendly, nice to meet you, welcome to the team kind of approach that made me feel so comfortable. It was the biggest show at the time that I had ever done to do that semifinal game during championship week of March Madness. And so it was such a welcoming feeling. Well, fast forward to 86, I'm being hired to move to Connecticut in December of that year after the football season ended. I had been working sidelines on the CFA primetime team with Mike Patrick and Pat McAnally, and so they decided to hire me and move me to Connecticut to be both a play-by-play guy and a studio host. I did not know at the time that when I got there, because I was looking forward to meeting Greg, that Greg had just left. And the guy that I was replacing, or actually I think it was two of us that replaced him, the late, great John Saunders, who was my best friend in the time that I was at ESPN, he and I were about to start hosting the 7 o'clock Sports Center show, which had been Greg's show before he resigned to go to Madison Square Garden Network. So literally the end of the week before we got there, he had left. And as he left, he wrote a letter to the higher-ups about what the morale was like in the Sports Center newsroom. And he was a lovely man that cared deeply about everybody that he worked with and for. But there was the people that were in charge of Sports Center at that particular time were putting limitations of saying to Chris Berman he couldn't use his nicknames anymore. Remember the big kerfuffle about Chris could no longer say Bert, be home by 11.
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
Jim, two silhouettes on Deshays and all that.
Mm-hmm.
The guys that were in charge there were in Greg's estimation, causing morale to really go downhill. And he knew he was leaving. He knew he was going to MSG, but he was concerned about the anchors that he was leaving behind because they were all unhappy. And he felt like that he would be just the first of a lot of guys that were hitting the exit. And so he wrote a letter. And the guy that had replaced the people that were later fired because of, in some measure, what he wrote to the higher-ups, took me aside, the new fella that was going to be in charge of Sports Center at that time, said to me, Tim, you're going to be doing the 7 o'clock show with John Saunders. And he said, that's the show that Greg Gumbel used to do. And you'll be doing it during the week. You'll do like 3 days, have a couple of days off, do it again for 3 more days and whatnot. I said, so you're in the rotation for the 7 o'clock. And he said, and Greg Gumbel's the reason why. And Greg left to go to MSG. But when he did that, he was trying to make life a lot better for all the producers, all the directors, all the other talent that he was leaving behind. So he was legendary there. He was put on such a high pedestal because of not just the way he was on the air, but the way he treated people off the air and the way he felt all people should be treated. And he really thought in his heart of hearts that they weren't being treated to that standard. And he wanted people to know about it that maybe weren't as concerned about the morale. Think about that. That's a heavy, heavy thing to do, but a really wonderful thing to do for the people that you're leaving behind if you think the place is special. And he did feel that ESPN was special, and he wanted to protect it. And he wanted the people that had been there that loved it, guys like Berman, Mees, George Grand, so many of the lifers that had been there, Bob Lee. He wanted it to be better. And about a week after he left and I had gotten there and John Saunders had gotten there, we were invited to a party that a bunch of the old guard was putting on for Greg when he was coming back to pick up some of his clothing and luggage and maybe some furniture from his house. And it was just such a warm night. It was just the ultimate feel good. And you knew right away this guy was special. Fast forward again to the 90s. I'm at CBS, had been there since 96. Greg was at NBC at that time. They lost the NFL to, guess who? CBS. Greg had left CBS and gone to NBC when CBS lost the NFL to Fox in 1994. So he's over at NBC. And then when NBC lost the contract to CBS in 98, he came over from there to do play-by-play, not to do the studio, but to do play-by-play. But after he did that for, I think, 4 years, working with Phil Simms and doing 2 Super Bowls, he moved back, switched places with Jim Nantz, you might recall. And Jim had been hosting the NFL on Sunday. I was hosting it on Saturdays. And so in the early 2000s, Greg and I would see each other every weekend. And our paths would cross in the hallways of the broadcast center. And we'd talk about all kinds of things. He loved the Rolling Stones. I loved the Eagles and Electric Light Orchestra and the Doobie Brothers. He had a great personality, just a vivacious sense of humor. But he was a very private man, a very private person with his family. And that's one of the reasons I think he never let anyone know that it was him that was among the family concerns when he stepped away in March of last year. Those of us that were close to him, and I share the same agent that he has, we were made aware. But he didn't want to be a burden to anyone, and he didn't want to put his family in a position of having to deal with so much attention coming his way because of the fight that he was having to wage against cancer. He knew that it was going to be a hard fight. He was going to fight it, but if he didn't win it, he was going to be okay with that. That's just the way it is. He worked all the way up until really he got too sick to work. So he loved it, just like I love it. But his approach to life and his approach to people was his greatest strength. His humanity was even better than his professional capability. And I think that's what you're seeing. This outpouring of love and care and emotion for his memory is due in large measure to that. We shared the same love for music. We didn't share the same politics at all, but that was never a problem, never an issue. He was as kind to the guy that was cleaning up the studio in New York as he was to the guy that was making sure that he had that magnificent seat on Studio 43 doing the NFL Today. He was just a wonderfully kind-hearted, good, solid human being to everyone he ever touched. And I don't think he ever knew or even cared to know how great a professional he really was. It came that easily to him. He was humbled by the fact that people made a big deal. He would be embarrassed by the big fuss that everybody's making over him right now. But it's understood and I think deserved for us to be making a big fuss over him.
Tim, Merry Christmas. Of course, that's the last week. Happy New Year tomorrow night late, and we'll hopefully one more time we get to the semifinals and championship game. Get your feedback on the teams and the matchups we have, and also some of the teams you broadcast this year. We appreciate your time.
Love to do it, David. All the best to you guys. Happy 2025 to you all.
You too. Tim Brando, Fox Sports, with us on Many Things College Football on 365 Sports. When we come back,